Meantime, this time tomorrow we will know whether interest rates are going to go up for one last time this year. Now, fingers crossed, looks like it won't happen, but you don't want to bet on anyone here. You have to wait and see what happens. First Tuesday of every month, that being tomorrow, the last one for the year. The expectations are that with the slight changes in the monthly inflation numbers and the slight changes in retail sales, that most likely this thing can get put off until maybe February. But remember, interest rates have gone up by the Albo-dozen. There's been 13 interest rates since they started coming up post-pandemic, 12 of those under this government. Now, remember, under the last government, it was, the sky's falling in. Well, 12 of them on this government's watch, including after they sacked the Reserve Bank governor. Well, no excuses whatsoever. And, of course, it's important to note that people are noticing federal government spending. Now, the federal government, while it wants to turn around and say that it's not going to do anything to increase inflation by just firing cash cannons around, by having 35% of the budget being handouts to people via welfare, increasing the amount of welfare that those 35% of people get, it creates inflation, let alone the billions of dollars of infrastructure projects that they're locked into as a result of the states. That will increase inflation. Something that the boss of the Australian and New Zealand Bank, the ANZ Bank, had to say, Shane Elliott. Now, he says that government itself is part of the reason why interest rates, even if they don't rise for the next few months, will not be coming down for a few years. The ANZ Chief Executive, Shane Elliott, has warned that Australia must prepare for higher for longer interest rates. We've baked in government spending pressures through at the end of the decade from infrastructure, housing, climate transition, set to make inflation sticky. Put simply, government spending now is part of the mix of why interest rates will stay as high as they currently are, the highest they have been in a generation, 12 of them since Albo came to power. This is a bigger concern, is that the real prospect is that interest rates won't be cut over the coming year. You have to stand back, forget next year. Just forget next year, says the boss of the ANZ Bank. Think about the next 5 years. So remember, we're in a scenario right now, as we've shown you many, many times, people on $500,000 needing to find the best part of an extra $11,000 to pay off their homes compared to this time about a year ago or before there was a change of government. If you happen to be someone who's trying to pay off a mortgage over $1 million, then you end up having to find an extra $30,000. And that will be stuck there for another 5 years. So yes, good news that it doesn't keep going up, but if it's still at this level, it's at a very high level for potentially as long as 5 years. Now today, Penny Wong was asked about this very situation, including that somebody on $750,000 loan has to find an extra $21,000, $500,000 loan, $13,500, and $1 million, an extra $30,000. Thank you to my team. I was doing it off the top of my head and they've given me the air support with the stats. Look at that. That's the amount of extra money since this government came to power. And it could well end up be that amount on top of what you were paying for up to the next 5 years, according to the boss of the ANZ Bank. Thank you, team. Penny Wong was asked about this today, again, in this Senate question time. And I tell you what, I paid attention, and this is the garbage they're serving up. Again, most senior person answering questions in the government today. Here's Penny Wong being asked about interest rates.
Should Australians prepare to live with interest rates being higher for longer, as forecast by ANZ CEO Shane Elliott?
So you just heard. Government spending is why interest rates don't go down for most likely the next 5 years. This person's response, sadly, exactly what I said this government will take into the next election about why you should trust them when it comes to economic management, despite the fact that your life has become demonstrably worse.
We are committed to fighting inflation because we do understand the effect that inflation has.
President, on relevance, I mentioned interest rates, not inflation, and the minister is yet to actually use the phrase interest rates.
I'm interested in a proposition that inflation is not relevant to interest rates. That seems to be the point of that seems to be the point of that. That seems to be the point of that point of order, is that somehow a discussion of inflation is not relevant to interest rates. As I recall, this government returned a surplus in 22-23, and I know that is difficult for the coalition to accept because they trumpeted the Back in Black trumpeted the Back in Black, got the mugs out, were quite triumphant, but then, of course, didn't actually deliver one. And I know that's very hard for them to accept, President.
Now, remember how they got to a surplus and increased the amount of resources that were being taxed. Plus, on top of that, they were able to, for the first time in history, count the profits of Peter Costello's controlled future fund. That's how they ended up with a surplus. But don't forget, the intergenerational report released by the very same people who put the federal budget together says there will be budget deficits for the next 40 years. So they think because they've got a budget surplus, Australia's going awesome. The only thing that's going awesome are the people that are clipping the ticket. And the people clipping the ticket is the government. The average citizen is hurting. Remember what I said before about the cost of living pressures, 80% of people are now starting to feel the pressure. They will not fall for cheaper Christmas ham stunts or governments that want to give themselves a pat on the back for still having record spending that will feed into inflation and predictions of budget deficits for the next 40 years. Ridiculous.